The Tribe podcast show is a production of Kangaroo Fern Media Lab, which is all about supporting you to start and build a thriving business. Tribe podcast on AusPod Syndicate.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. We really appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further. Here is your host.
Hello, Humanista. This is Nico Santos from the Tribe podcast under AusPod Syndicate. Please welcome to another episode of the Tribe podcast, which is, it's all about business startup. If you have an idea how to scale up that business, and if you need a mentors, so we have different type of guests in our podcast show, which is can help you, give you help and tips in relation with the startup and business. For today episode, our guest for today is on the other side of the continent. So she is Jan Cavelle.
That's right.
Yep, and she's from United States, but United Kingdom. So, an entrepreneur. She also the first 50 female entrepreneurial ambassador to represent the UK in Europe. So, I'm gonna ask her how is her experience about that. So, please welcome, as I said, Miss Jan Cavelle. Welcome to the show.
Miko, thank you so much for having me. I know I'm a long way away, but Australia is very dear to my heart. My son is now a nationalised Australian, so I have a special connection with you, I hope.
Thank you so much for your time. I know the time difference there is in the morning, and this here is going to be almost 7:40 in the evening now in Adelaide. For our listener and our audience, so who is Jan Cavelle?
Wow. I am somebody with a very, very long career of starting small businesses. Mostly I have been starting small ones, which are more of a self-employed or sort of one or two man bands. And I started one as a single mum, which because I wanted to do a lot more for my children, I actually grew and scaled up to the multi-million mark. So I have a fair bit of experience with both very, very bootstrap businesses and scaling. And as you very kindly mentioned, I was incredibly privileged. Among the other amazing opportunities I've had through having businesses, I was chosen, this was a while ago now, but I was one of the first 50 women to represent the UK in a promoting enterprise scheme in Europe, which was a real great honour. So that's me.
So you're saying you're the first 50 female entrepreneur ambassador to represent the UK in Europe. So how is your experience about it?
That was amazing. As I say, it was a scheme that was started a fair while ago now, and is non-existent now. Like all government schemes, they morph into different variations. So we're going back a little while now, but it was incredible. We were very privileged. I mean, I got to go to the European Parliament, which is not something everybody gets to do, and see the workings of that and listen to other countries as well, and talking about their struggles, which were all very different, with promoting enterprise, which was fascinating as well as hopefully useful to each other.
Your podcast journey starts here. Take the first step on your side. Hustle with us. It starts with a great domain. Get your podcast web host with Beard and Coffee at www.beardandcoffee.com.au or find us at Facebook.
And I did a lot of, what we were tasked to do was promoting enterprise with schools and colleges and business groups and talking about it as much as possible to encourage people to actually consider running their own businesses as an alternative to employment, especially with unemployment rising as it was then and as of course it is again now. Even if you're in employment, it's a way to give yourself a bit of safeguarding if it's a side hustle that you've got, that just in case the awful happened, you'd have something to fall back on. And life can take some funny turns, as it did with me with single motherhood. And, you actually might need to really push on with your own business for some reason. And it's a great way to lead life. I mean, I wouldn't ever have it any other way if you're that way inclined. It's a fabulous life, as I'm sure you'll agree.
So how did you started this entrepreneur journey? Because I'm working 9 to 5 every day. I cannot be rich for 9 to 5 job.
You're absolutely right. I hated the idea of a 9 to 5 job. And did start off doing them and did very badly at them because, of course, I hated doing them and therefore didn't make any effort and half the time didn't turn up. And so it very quickly, I mean, I was probably barely 20 by the time it dawned on me that really this wasn't going to be the answer and I was never going to stay employed. And, and I sat back and thought about it and thought, actually, why do I hate this so much? It's not the working hard, which I'd never had a problem with. It's going out, into strange companies that I don't like, being told what to do by people who I don't have much time for. And just generally the lack of control of my time and my life. It was even less flexible back then, where I was so much more respecting, I think, or many companies are, of work-life balance and things. Then it was, you were expected to work and live to work all the time. And I wanted control. I didn't mind the work, but I wanted control of what I did. And I didn't really care what I did. And I had a fair bit of sales experience from lots of my short-lived jobs and actual sales training courses that I'd gone on. And of course, that's something I'm a huge fan of for anybody. There's nearly always sales jobs around, even if they're commission only, but it's still something to fall back on. And it's a huge asset if you're going to start a side hustle, is just to get that experience of understanding how to sell and getting over the I can't do that barrier, which we all have. So I thought, I'm going to sell things. It doesn't really matter what. And goodness knows I did an assortment. But it was all based about getting something and selling it, and with a markup on that I could live on. Simple as that, simple interpretation of business.
What is your first product or service when you start your business? What business is that, if you can remember?
The very, very first one, I think, was selling wine. And I freelanced for a wine company selling their wine, curiously enough. But and I got a markup on the bottles, and there were event invitations and visiting people and whatnot. But it gave me my own time. It wasn't particularly well paid, but it was quite fun. You got to talk to other people, and it brought me an income. And all of a sudden, I didn't have to go to a horrible grotty office somewhere in the back end beyond and do a job I was miserable, locked up in a dark room all day. So it was a good start, but I moved on from there and did, I think the next one was sandwiches around offices. So it really was a question of it didn't really matter what, but selling something. Good experience.
So you love selling.
I do love selling now. I didn't particularly like it then, but I knew it was something, I'd had enough experience. I had the confidence to do it. And, when you're determined to make it work over the years, you just do make it work, and you scratch your head and think, actually, I'm getting better at this, because there's nothing like practice. And so you do get better, yeah. And then you think, this is something I do okay at, so I will do it, and you don't mind it half as much as you did when you wanted to curl up and die in the beginning.
So you started on selling wine, and then now you are one of the leading business entrepreneur in UK. So during that time, and also right now, there is a real gender gap in the industry.
I mean, that's an interesting question, actually, because I ended up going into manufacturing by a complicated route, because again, I was selling stuff I brought in. This was by which time I had the children, and I couldn't get a good enough supply. So it struck me the only sensible thing to do was have my own manufacturing business, which I'm not sure how sensible it was looking back on it, but it seemed terribly wise at the time. Now, manufacturing is very, very sexist still in this country. I mean, there's no way around it. I was trying to think of some polite way to put it, but it's downright sexist.
This podcast is brought to you by AusPod Syndicate, powered by Kangaroo Fern Media Lab. Kangaroo Fern is Australia's independent video and podcast management agency with a mission to help individuals and entrepreneurs to start their own podcasts and harness the power of podcasting. Book now via www.kangaroofern.com.
And no females don't want to work in it. Quite often I would get a state, we had sort of up to 40 odd staff, about 44, I think, 45 at the biggest point. And there would be moments when I had no other woman in the company, not because I had any objection to it, but because I couldn't find anybody who wanted to work there who was female. And the attitudes were very strange when things were going well with the shop floor. They were tolerant and accepting, and they had a nice person in the office looking after them, but they did not take it well from a woman when things were going badly. It was a sort of town, an area that people, the males were still senior in the community, and the women did tend to be sort of what they call it over here, which is sort of her indoors, and that's the woman's position still, which to me I found really mind-boggling, in this day and age. But yeah, really bad. Generally, I think it is a time for opportunity, because I think traditional for women, actually, because in many ways, and women need to grab it, because I think a lot of the traditionally sort of setups of the man going out to work and a woman at home, which still exist, those traditional jobs may be endangered, and it may be more likely that the men will get redundant, or just as likely, and it may be the woman who has to become innovative and become the new breadwinner. And why not? Roles will be up for grabs. I think it'll be a much more even time, and all the good for it.
Okay, so the reason why I'm asking that question, because you are a member of Women Influence Community. So
yes.
Can you tell us, what is it?
The Women Influence Community was started to promote, the women role, and they believe that it's perfectly possible to be a feminine woman but still promote a career. You can actually stay a woman and do it, which I think is fine. I don't think it matters. I think it should be what you're comfortable as. A lot of them are very glamorous ladies, and it's probably they out glamorize me by long jaw. So I just think you should, that we all should be able to be authentically ourselves, to be honest. And if we want to wear old dungarees, or if we want to put half a ton of fancy hats and lipstick on, whatever it is, you should be you.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
You've been in the business for a long time. So why from business to an author? Can you tell me your journey in writing this book? Why Scale for Success?
Scale for Success came about, well, actually, while I was still in business, I started writing, because I'd always wanted to write. It was sort of all, as I explained, all the business stuff was a necessity to earn money. And I'd always had a bit of a dream of writing. And while I had the furniture business, I started writing for a digital publication online called Real Business. And I loved it. It was all of a sudden I was, I could see that my absorption with what I was doing was at a whole different level to anything else. So when I sort of thought I'd retire, which didn't last very long, but when I thought I'd retire, I thought, this is the perfect opportunity to write. Can I write? Can I, am I good enough? All the usual things we say to ourselves when we go into a new career. And I tried a few ideas around. So, well, what do I know about? And thought, particularly with the furniture business, I was taking it up, as I mentioned, to the sort of multi-million mark. And that leap from 1 million up is such a tough one. I'm told now, because I've talked to a lot of people about it, that it's probably the toughest of all the leaps in business. Starting's jolly hard. I'm not saying it isn't. It is really tough. But, one or two companies get a lucky flow and they get going and everything else. But that transition between 1 million and say 10 million just is a completely different animal altogether. And a lot of founders don't expect it, myself included. I thought it was just going to be absolutely the same but bigger, and it isn't, of course, at all. And so I thought, well, maybe I could do this writing and I could write about all the things I got wrong, which were lots, and also, some of the things that I learned that were right, and involve some other people in it, and put together the sort of book that I would have absolutely loved to have had myself when I was doing that scale. And then, the whole thing has been an absolute dream come true, because last Christmas I thought, I've started this thing, what do I do? Do I self-publish? Do I get a publisher? Panic. And I had a fairly quiet Christmas, so I put in a submission to Bloomsbury Publishing and said, I've got this book. And they rang me and said, come in for a meeting, which is in the publishing world is just unheard of good luck. It was timing, serendipity, the gods were smiling. I don't know. I was a very lucky and goodness knows grateful person. And so here we are. The book called Scale for Success is all about scaling that gap, and lots of advice in it from some incredible people, including, I have to say, some wonderful Australian entrepreneurs who have contributed, who I've been fascinated to hear their stories from you, both male and female ones. An incredible. It's been such a privilege, Miko. I can't tell you. It's been wonderful talking to them and getting their contributions.
We are Independent Podcast Network. We are Guerrilla Podcast Syndicate. Would you like to hear your brand while supporting quality podcasts? Contact us now at advertise@guerrillapodcastsyndicate.com.
So yeah, it's out on the 2nd of February, officially in the UK. So it's out on Kindle then for the rest of the world, but it will be coming hard copy to Australia as well, because of course Bloomsbury published with you too. So
that's fantastic. I'm gonna grab one.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so before we wrap up the podcast, I just have one question for you. Any advice to women in a startup or already in the business industry on how to grow their business or how to start up, particularly during this pandemic?
I think starting up, I have a friend who says who talks a lot about starting up and does some wonderful things over here encouraging startups. And he says to people, just avoid the debt. Start off, if you have one client, you have a business. Focus on getting a customer and go from there. And then, if you get 2 customers, but don't get too hung up on this whole right at the start with a bootstrap business, complicated plans, and providing you haven't got any debt, You don't need to do that. You need to think a bit like I did. Get something that you can sell and then see if they would have preferred something slightly different and refine it. It's experimentation. Just avoid the debt if you can. So do it as a side hustle or save a bit of money to do it or whatever. And test the water, but just keep on selling something and making some money. And then you're better off than you were before. Don't be frightened by it, I think is my startup advice. Scaling, different thing. I think you want to give some very careful thought in advance to whether your business is scalable and why you're doing it, because it's very tough. And a lot of people start businesses for freedom, like I did, not necessarily to run a big business. And then we take on this idea that it's the right thing to do to have a big business. And it isn't for everybody. But if it, and people actually ruin good businesses scaling for the wrong reasons. But if you decide to scale, then you want to spend some time really planning it and nailing it. You don't just wander into it. You want to have the right systems in place. Again, quoting somebody Australian, there's a lovely book called Systemology by David Jennings, who is over with you. And that's great on advice to get your systems going. And then, of course, there's the crucial thing. You need the right people in place if you're going to scale. And, again, we drift into it and think if you're strong on sales like I was, it's very easy to drift in and think, when we need people, we'll get them. But by then it's too late. You actually need to plan it all out in advance. If you're going to scale, put a solid foundation in place to do it with.
That's a great tips and advice. Thank you for that. So do you have anything to say to our listener and to our audience as well?
Just believe in yourselves and you'll do a great job and enjoy it. Don't do it if it's not fun, because if you haven't got the passion, then you haven't got much chance of success. But it should be fun and make it fun.
Thank you for that. So thank you very much, John, for your time today for our podcast. So to our listener and to our audience as well. So I'll put all the link on our show notes. The website of Jan Cavelle jancavelle.co.uk. So we'll put that on the show notes. So thank you so much again for your time. I know you're a busy person, but thank you for the time that you're giving to the Tribe podcast.
My pleasure.
Hopefully our audience and listener get some help and tips in relation with the startup, looking to get a business, especially during pandemic. A lot of people are thinking of getting an online business because they're stuck up and stay at home. So thank you for that advice and tips. So also thank you so much to Kangaroo Firm Media Lab. So they are the podcast management service who is producing this podcast. So if you want to book or if you want to do a podcast or launch a podcast, just go to www.kangaroofirm.com. And thank you so much. See you again next week. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by AusPod Syndicate, powered by Kangaroo Fern Media Lab. Kangaroo Fern is Australia's independent video and podcast management agency with a mission to help individuals and entrepreneurs to start their own